Well, hello, everybody. One of the key aspects of re-enlightening is encouraging people to keep an open mind, look at things from a different perspective, try to see things differently than you might otherwise. One of the 20 books that I quote, and I believe I only quote it once, is actually a favorite of mine in terms of keeping an open mind. It's called America's Bank by Roger Lowenstein. It's the story of the Federal Reserve. Ooh, the Federal Reserve. You might have an opinion. Okay, hold that thought for a moment. You see, the Federal Reserve is a very large, powerful institution operating from what seems like very much the top down. Does it control the economy? Uh, there are a lot of different conspiracy theories about that. Now, perhaps you immediately went to a book that you read, and I'm glad you're reading about these things, but a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Well, I'm here to tell you that that book is full of lies and propaganda. John Birch stuff from the 1950s. It is it is objectively just plain wrong. In that book, there's the allegation that the Federal Reserve was created by this secret meeting of bankers in 1910. No background on why they were meeting, no interest in the story. The truth is, what happened was in 1907, there was a financial panic in the United States. Now, there were many financial panics. What we mean by that is basically the entire banking system latched up for some fairly technical reason. There was a lot of selling. They couldn't resolve the issues. This created a panic. People literally panicked and wanted to sell more. It made the situation worse because there was no one there to provide some liquidity and keep the markets functioning as proper markets. What happened in 1907 was the richest man in the world, J.P. Morgan, the guy, not the company, uh, had to step in and personally bail out the United States. Now, he was laughing about the situation, basically like, I could do whatever I want here. The problem is they'll shoot me. Everything was fair, everything was reasonable, it was all good. But when that was all over, they looked at it and said, wow, we were just days from disaster, absolute disaster. And we're depending on the richest guy in the world doing the right thing. This was not a good situation. So in 1910, a few years later, they got together and met at a resort. And yeah, it was a little secretive at first, but we have complete notes from it. There is complete transparency, at least after the fact, just to discuss the purpose of a central bank, what it might do, and what concerns they might have about doing this. And it was done with all the different bankers, and there were a lot of concerns. You see, the United States did not have a central bank at that time, unlike most nations. What is a central bank? It is the bank for banks. Okay, when banks get into trouble, it's the lender of last resort, the thing that bails everybody out. And since the United States didn't have one, if all the individual banks kind of latched up, there was nobody there to keep it moving, make sure that tomorrow is another day, essentially, and everything could be sorted out later. Uh, the reason why you need a central bank is basically comes down to timing. There are often temporary problems that can be resolved eventually with enough time. And what is a bank? Well, banks all create money essentially by moving money backwards in time. You have deposits on hand, but fractional deposits that are on somebody's books, and you loan out money basically 8 times, 10 times as much as that. This is how money is created. All money is debt, and you're basically moving money from the future into today. Okay? I should get into this more later, but the point being that a central bank that allows you to move a whole bunch of money from the future into today gets you through a short-term problem, and you can sort it out later. You have time to do something reasonable, and you avoid the panics. That's the purpose of a central bank. And they knew in 1910 that they needed it, but they were very suspicious of the whole thing. So what are you going to do? Have one central bank? Well, a proposal was floated to have 46 central banks, one for each state. There were 46 states at the time. And I said, nah, that's too much. That would be too crazy. They settled on 12 regional banks, the system we have today. Now, again, you may have opinions about the Federal Reserve. Let me talk about this. Those heads of the regional branches are elected by the non-banking members of the community that represents them. The banks don't get a vote. And yes, it is completely independent and all that. But you may have a question about, should we audit the Fed? Well, look, the Fed had a serious transparency problem. And under the leadership of Fed Chair Janet Yellen, she was a tiger about this, just addressed this very directly. You want to audit the Fed? The books are available online. You can see them yourself. You can go through them yourself, every detail. So it is transparent. And, they're doing their best to make this happen. Why am I going on about the Fed? First of all, I'm one of the few people who will defend it, along with Roger Lowenstein. Some of this comes from this book, and I definitely encourage you to read this, especially if you do have concerns. But more importantly, I think the Federal Reserve, or the concept of a central bank, is a very good example of the yin and yang relationship of top-down versus bottom-up systems. See, a central bank seems like a top-down interference in the economy. But to the extent that it keeps everything working and creates a stable banking system and a stable currency, it allows bottom-up movement. You see, you can't have a functioning economy with everybody participating in it unless you have some level of stability. So this was the problem with forming the Federal Reserve. The panic of 1907, sure, but it didn't get passed until 1912. It took 5 years to work out just how they would make sure that it had some checks and balances, but still remained independent. Did they necessarily have the right balance? We can always revisit that, but the concept is extremely important. A central bank is needed to keep everything moving. That central bank needs to be in service to its communities first and the larger economy second. That system is set up. Now, I've gone on and on defending the Federal Reserve, its creation, its operation. Do I still have problems with it? Yes, I do. See, one of the functions that they have is regulating banks. Congress gave a big punt on this and said, when it comes to regulating banks and so on, we don't have the expertise in the federal government to do that. The Federal Reserve has that expertise, so they should be the ones that do the stress tests and make sure that everything is functioning right. Okay, sounds great in principle. Nice technocratic answer, isn't it? The problem is that a lot of people at the Federal Reserve are indeed there for a short period of time. Let's say you're working at a financial institution, you kind of top out on your career. Well, you can get another job at the Federal Reserve. The pay is a lot worse, but you can stay there for a few years, pad your resume, and then go over to, get a job with JP Morgan, a much better job than you had before because you have experience. So there's a bit of a revolving door of people going in and out. That's the experience, right? They know the bank, they know the financial world because they've worked in it. And they wind up regulating the banks that they either worked for or they're going to work for, or there's a conflict of interest in that. And the reason they did it that way is because the Fed has the experience. So I still have issues with the Fed. I still feel that there are times when it's this elite class that is ruling down on us. And there are reasons to have reform. But opening up the books for everybody's inspection, that's great stuff. The way Federal Reserve governors are elected, really great stuff. Does it generally provide the stability? Does it do its job to get us through difficult times and give us time to respond in a more reasoned and rational way? 100%. And it's independent. It's not subject to political whims. That's really important. So there are some checks and balances. There are descriptions in its charter that limit it, and we need it. We definitely need it. I definitely encourage you to read America's Bank. And of course, some of the concepts that I outline here in Re-Enlightening, they're not mentioned in America's Bank, but what I tried to do was look at how they made those decisions, what we need from the top down, what we need from the bottom up to check on it, and describe how those two come together, how they are not in opposition to each other necessarily, but they are born from each other, how they relate to each other, if you think about it the right way. So read America's Bank for the details of how it happened and form your own opinion about the Federal Reserve. Keep an open mind. This is a great exercise in open-mindedness. And when evaluating the decisions they made, well, this was something that I had in mind when I was writing Re-Enlightening, is how do we look at this and make sure that it makes sense. That's all for today, everybody. Thank you so much.